Good morning, everybody. My name is Abdul Aziz Mana. I'm an Afroactivist, as I'm a suburb activist and a humanitarian sometimes. I want to make a particular point here. It's a caution, of course. There are some places that are not easy to penetrate, especially in remote areas, the areas affected by insurgency. And most probably they are also captured in the budget. How are we going to do to trace such places? Do we access for security agencies to protect us, or will be on our own to penetrate such areas? And moreover, we should also be very careful in terms of selecting people. Sometimes some people may be used by politicians to jeopardize our work, or rather show hatred to the opponent. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Good morning, all. My name is Ambassador Ahmed Bolori. I'm from Maiduguri, Exit Lens Organization. I have keenly followed all of the conversations and the chats, including the voice notes that were dropped. And it is very important and it's helpful indeed. But most importantly, one thing we need to understand is it's not all about being a chapter lead, but having the word lead in implication. By that I mean you really have to identify a lot of people who have qualities within your community or within the state you work, and do not let your person to be the only person who is leading that struggle. Even if you are the lead, then try as much as you can to have more people who are like-minded and people who really would like to work towards such kind of developments. And most importantly, you have to desist from politicians. Do not be seen much in the midst of politicians, because um, they might ruin what you're doing. And at the end of the day, in that state you're operating, people might end up, describing you as one of, their political actors who is, trying very hard with the other opposition or with the government in power to cover some things. So it is very important for us to note all this. And like I've said, I will emphasize again, it's not all about having much chapters in the state, but having a good connection. For those of you who already established chapters, if there are people who are relevant that you know within your state, you can bring them in to work together with them, nurture them, and let them understand the context, work together, identify things, and if need be, in future you introduce them so that various other chapters will be reintroduced in that particular state. So thank you so much, and this conversation is really, really very, very, very important and helpful. Thank you, and stay blessed. I understand that we're about rounding up, but let me quickly say this. Previously, as some of you have talked about having the security agencies and working with them. Yes, but you have to understand something. You must as in you must let the security agencies know what you do, but do not allow yourself to be used by them, because most of these agencies are being controlled by those various state governments, and including the federal government that we are trying to make, accountable. So sometimes you have to know the red lines, and you have to put the indicators that there are, there are things you need to do with them, and there are things you also need to keep. What I mean by that is, I don't mean you should be secretive in some of the things you do, but just let them know that as security agents, this is what you do, and you also have the right for them to to protect you, and at the same time, they have the right to know what you are doing. That's just it. But if you go anything beyond that, that will be another problem, especially sitting with them discussing about the damages caused by government, insulting, or maybe even criticizing government in front of them, showing them that you're an activist, yeah, you know how to talk. That will be the beginning of a big problem. And also, respecting information is very important. Any information you get, you have to dwell into that. You have to work extensively well on that information before taking it over. And like the I Follow the Money program provides, whatever you will do, you have to report. We have data miners, we have lots of other key agents that work towards ensuring that the information is well captured. So going through that channel will help you get out of trouble. If not, if you don't go through those channels that are already established, you might end up having yourself in trouble by publishing an information that is not authentic, and you could be, you understand, you could be sued for damage and any other thing that might come up, and you would have nobody to stand for you. So reporting to that platform is very, very key and important. It's one of the pillars. So you have to know that. It's very important. And finally, I would like to emphasize on this. Those of us from different states who already have people, like Tunde has already said, it's not all about establishing many, many chapters. If you have few chapters, develop those chapters, and when the need comes, naturally there will be a need for another chapter. Then you will push towards that. You understand? So this is very important for you to note. And I will be off now. Thank you.
Okay, Eve, to answer your question, we first of all we have to understand that the local chapters are still in their pilot phases. It was a couple of months ago that we started. But prior to that, they have been running respective activities in their respective states. But the issue with impacts now is that sometimes it might take a while to actually see real impacts or the kind of impacts that we want to see on the ground. But in the short term, we are starting to see that responsiveness from government officials, from the people, the community. People are willing to be more aware about what is happening in their communities and to actually take responsibility, to take a stand and say, okay, we're willing to come together to make this happen. We've even seen we've seen situations where people are asking for, follow the money to come to their respective communities, come to their respective states. For us, these are the kind of long-term impacts that we want to see, and the fact that we are starting to see some response in this particular direction is quite encouraging for us. It tells us that all the work we're doing is not in vain, and then there's really a long way for us to go, and then we can actually continue. So Daniel, to answer your first question here, if I am to understand by your question, by intervention, you're meaning what other maybe tangible things does Follow the Money provide for communities? Well, like Tunde has said, at Connected Development, our motto is empowering marginalized communities. But now the question is, and how do we empower them? So empowering for us comes in many forms, but majorly in the form of connecting communities to development that ordinarily should come to them. So we for us, we think that one of the things that, or one of the major issues or differences between developed communities and the ones that are even less developed is the fact that it's a access is in the differences in the access to information that they have. So we want to come in to bridge that gap to say, okay, the difference between these two types of communities, the fact that one has access to information about certain things, the other doesn't have access to information. So those that don't have access for whatever reason, we bring the information closer to them, and we show them, or we teach them what to do with that information to make their communities better. So for us, it's not about building wells or building hospitals or building schools in the community, but to ensure that the community understands that they have a responsibility to themselves, they have a responsibility of generations unborn, and that responsibility is to ensure that they hold their governments accountable and then show them the ways that they can do this, because ordinarily most of these things are supposed to be provided, or they are responsibilities of the government to the people, but because nobody's asking questions, nobody's holding them accountable, we find out that most times there's a tendency for the governments to act on their own whims, to mismanage, misappropriate funds, and then corruption is the order of the day. But if the governments are know that the people that they actually serve are more informed, are ready to hold them accountable, there's less likelihood that we would have such issues of corruptions and misappropriations like we currently do, especially for these rural communities that nobody really wants to go to. Nobody's asking questions. It's almost like they're on their own. Whatever happens there stays in there. So that for us is the major change that we want to bring about. That's the theory of change that we're working with, not necessarily about building hospitals, but yeah, we understand that in some cases some of these calls might be important where you know we actually have to advocate for these things. Then in such cases we actually do advocate to the right authorities, the government officials, international donors, to say, hey, this community is in dire need of a hospital and there's no provision anywhere anyhow for this. Can you guys make sure that this happens, so that for us, those are the kind of things that we do at Follow. Eve, I think at this point it's also important to note that for the kind of work that we do at Follow the Money is not your everyday kind of work that people would ordinarily want to be interested in. So it has to come from a place of passion. You have to be passionate about it. You have to be passionate about change. You have to be passionate about development for your community, for your people, for generations unborn. So if ordinarily you're passionate about it, money necessarily is not the first thing you think about. Yeah, there are things that need to be taken care of, people you don't expect to be doing stuff just in vain. But essentially the monetary part of it is not necessarily or really your first consideration. Okay, basic expenses, yes, will be taken care of, but understanding first of all that you're doing this for yourself, you're doing this for your community, you're doing it for your children unborn, doing it basically for the society at large is very important. And I think that this is something we need to make people understand when we are bringing them on, so that people don't come with unfounded expectations, or that we have to start debunking later. But essentially let people understand from the very beginning that this is about them, it's not about anybody else, and whatever they're doing, they're essentially doing it for themselves, and posterity will remember them for it. Yeah, gratification might come later on, but maybe not immediately. But essentially the impact is much more important for everybody.
Yeah, Abdulaziz, you are right. I have a cases like this. There was a case that reported to me that there is two villages, neighboring villages. One has more than 2,000 households. The other one has the kind of more than 1,500 population. But the place is very kind of affected by the insurgency. And then just few weeks ago, the neighboring village in that community burned down. So in cases like this, we need serious kind of support